Within the silent depths of the Heavenvoid Hall, a formation that had slumbered for countless years finally stirred to life. Above the ancient array, two figures hovered in the air, one calm and calculating, the other cold and unreadable as the vast mechanism that governed the entire tower slowly awakened beneath them. Neither of them realized that the fate of the Heavenvoid Hall was now tied to a single small cauldron. If you enjoy my way of explaining and storytelling, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really motivates me to keep creating. However, within such cramped quarters, Han Li naturally dared not unleash the fan's full might. Were he to do so, he himself would be caught in the devastating sweep of its power. Thus he merely flicked the fan with a restrained motion. At once a layer of tri-colored flames blossomed across its surface before shooting forward like a blazing blade, crashing violently into the film of light. A sharp, sizzling hiss erupted the instant the flames met the barrier. Just as expected, the power of the tri-flame fan was not something to be underestimated. A tear split open in the seemingly indestructible film of light. Though the incision stretched no more than a foot in length, it was more than enough for Han Li to slip through. Delight flashed across Han Li's face. Yet just as he was about to rush out of the teleportation formation, a burst of white light suddenly flared from the very gash he had created. Space itself seemed to ripple apart as the silver-robed woman tore through the void and appeared outside the formation. Raising one hand, her arm transformed into a sharp, translucent talon that thrust straight into the opening, as though she intended to drag Han Li out by force. A surge of urgency struck Han Li upon seeing this. He wished to leave the teleportation formation, but he certainly had no intention of falling into the grasp of a 10th-grade ice phoenix in the process. Just as he prepared to retaliate with the tri-flame fan, his expression abruptly changed. In a flash, the fan vanished from his hand. In its place appeared a shimmering blue medallion, the greater teleportation medallion. The moment Han Li produced the medallion, the ancient teleportation formation erupted with brilliant spiritual light. At the same time, the azure film of light surrounding it began to collapse and crumble. When the radiance faded, Han Li and the unbroken Cinque devils within the film of light had vanished. The silver-robed woman standing at the edge of the formation had disappeared as well. It seemed she had been dragged into the teleportation along with Han Li. The palace master faltered briefly at the sight before her. Then a complicated expression surfaced on her face, one that was both delighted and vexed. She was overjoyed that such a formidable enemy had been whisked away. Yet she was equally frustrated that the spirit treasure belonging to the matriarch of North Night Palace, Fair Ice Soul, had appeared and vanished right before her eyes without leaving the slightest trace. In the distance, the small child's face darkened ominously. A vicious glint flashed across his eyes as he glared coldly at the palace master. Suddenly, he threw back his head and released a piercing howl that seemed to split the clouds themselves. With an abrupt motion, he pointed toward the myriad demon flag hovering in the air. Instantly, the demonic chi surging from the flag swelled several-fold. Countless demonic projections of varying sizes erupted forth in a frenzy, their chaotic forms rolling through thick waves of demonic chi that engulfed a vast portion of the hall before rushing straight toward the palace master. The palace master's expression shifted, but at that very moment a flash of green light appeared before her as the infernal ghost mother stepped forward, positioning herself between the palace master and the oncoming tide. She raised her gaze toward the sky filled with demonic projections, and a cold smile slowly curved across her lips. With a graceful spin, she sent a vast torrent of green chi sweeping outward in all directions. In the blink of an eye, the surrounding space transformed into a nightmarish underworld filled with ghastly wails and bone-chilling cries. An immense sea of yin qi no less overwhelming than the demonic qi above spread across the ground before surging upward. In towering waves, green mist and black qi collided violently, twisting and intertwining in chaotic turbulence. Within the storm, demonic projections and ghostly entities clashed fiercely, their forms barely visible amid the roiling energies. The infernal ghost mother was capable of contending directly with old devil Chi's avatar in her ghost cultivator body, and she was not being forced onto the defensive. The palace master was overjoyed upon seeing this. Without hesitation, she cast aside all thoughts regarding Han Li. Rubbing her hands together briefly, she raised them toward the sky. Immediately blazing spheres of crimson lightning flames erupted forth and crashed into the demonic Chi above. Thunderous booms echoed endlessly throughout the hall. Woman, demon, and ghost alike vanished into the vast storm of demonic and ghostly Chi. From outside, only the occasional earth-shattering clash could be heard. Inside a stone chamber spanning over 300 feet, there stood a teleportation formation strikingly similar to the one located within the Spirit Void Hall. Han Li stood within the chamber, the Heavenvoid cauldron supported casually in one hand, his expression utterly emotionless as he faced an exquisite beauty across from him. Behind him, the humanoid puppet stood perfectly still, unmoving like a silent sentinel. Above it hovered the ghostly heads of the 5 devils. Their bloodthirsty gazes were locked onto the woman, and from time to time they released low, guttural snarls, as though ready to pounce the instant Han Li gave the command. The woman standing before him was naturally the 10th grade Ice Phoenix, who had been inadvertently dragged into the teleportation formation. In truth, the Ice Phoenix had been rather unlucky. The moment the azure film of light shattered, she sensed that something was amiss and immediately attempted to tear open space to escape the formation. Yet to her astonishment, the spatial power she unleashed resonated with the spatial force within the formation itself, dragging her helplessly into the teleportation sequence. It was evident that this had not been a mere short-distance teleportation. Had she not possessed extraordinary mastery over spatial manipulation, she would likely have been torn to pieces by the violent spatial currents during the journey. Even so, her situation remained far from optimistic. She now stood in one corner of the stone chamber, white spiritual light flickering across her body as she glared coldly at Han Li. According to her own estimation, if a life-and-death battle were to erupt between them, the odds would stand roughly at 40 to 60. Unfortunately for her, Han Li held the 60%. This realization was particularly frustrating. After all, she had suppressed her cultivation at the semi-deity transformation stage for countless years. Had she wished to advance, she could have stepped into the deity transformation stage long ago. Yet the human standing before her was one of the most troublesome opponents she had ever encountered. Despite being only at the mid-nascent soul stage, his power rivaled her own. Worse still, he possessed the unbroken Cinque Devils and that elusive humanoid puppet, both terrifying in their own right, each equivalent to a late-nascent soul cultivator. Thus, no matter how arrogant she might be, she could not possibly feel optimistic about battling Han Li. Still, she was not afraid of him either. Even if she could not defeat him, her spatial abilities would at least guarantee her escape. Han Li narrowed his eyes slightly as he observed the woman before him. He too felt somewhat uncertain about what course of action to take. After a brief silence, he finally let out a cold harumph and lifted one foot from the ground. His body rose into the air as he calmly drifted out of the formation, heading directly toward one of the bluestone walls of the chamber. The chamber itself was rather peculiar. There was not a single door to be seen, and the bluestone walls were perfectly smooth, without even the faintest seam or crack. In such a strange and unpredictable place, Han Li had little interest in fighting this Ice Phoenix. As long as she did not provoke him, he saw no reason to waste vast amounts of magic power in a battle against her, especially when her spatial abilities made her exceedingly difficult to deal with. Seeing this, the silver-robed woman's expression shifted subtly as she released a quiet sigh of relief. Meanwhile, Han Li had already extended his spiritual sense, carefully scanning the stone walls around him. Yet what he discovered caused his brows to knit together. The moment his spiritual sense seeped into the walls, it was forcefully repelled by a powerful resistance. Clearly, some formidable restriction had been placed upon the chamber, and that was the worst possible outcome. Han Li's expression darkened. Without hesitation, he suddenly thrust a finger toward the stone wall. Azure light flickered upon his fingertip as a half-foot beam of glacial light shot forth and stabbed into the blue stone. However, only a small portion of the attack penetrated before it too was repelled. Han Li calmly flicked his fingers again, sending 3 streaks of azure sword chi toward the other 3 walls. The result was identical. His eyes narrowed as he silently regarded the walls. A faint blue glimmer flickered deep within his gaze. Huh! The silver-robed woman scoffed coldly upon witnessing this. With a casual wave of her hand, a flash of white light appeared. In the next instant, her figure vanished from the chamber entirely. She had employed her spatial powers to escape. Han Li paid her no attention whatsoever. His gaze remained fixed upon the stone wall. Suddenly, the humanoid puppet behind him lifted its arm. A black dagger shot through the air like a streak of darkness, striking an inconspicuous point on the wall with a dull thud. The blue stone wall instantly crumbled. Han Li's eyes brightened. Beyond the shattered section lay what appeared to be an empty hall. The silver-robed woman was nowhere to be seen. However, as Han Li examined the scene more closely, his lips twitched slightly and an expression of disbelief flickered across his face. Before him stood a massive square stone gate over 100 feet in both length and width. Strange runes covered its surface, faint white light shimmering along its contours, clearly indicating the presence of powerful restrictions. Yet Han Li recognized this gate almost instantly. The moment realization struck, it felt as though a heavy blow had landed upon his heart. Astonishment surged within him. Taking a slow breath, Han Li composed himself before striding directly toward the gate. Golden light flashed as a flying sword, more than a foot long, appeared in his hand. With a swift slash, a streak of golden sword chi shot forward. White light flared across the stone gate's surface, but it was still cleaved cleanly in two, with a thunderous boom. Beyond it lay a bluestone intersection. Han Li's body swayed slightly. In the next moment, he had already appeared at the center of the crossroads. He quickly surveyed his surroundings. Then he froze completely. Bluestone paths stretched toward the north, south, east, and west. On both sides stood towering stone walls identical in shape and structure, as though they had been crafted from the same mold. After a long while, Han Li slowly exhaled. "There's no mistake," he murmured quietly, his voice tinged with disbelief. "This really is that place." This was none other than the massive 5-story bluestone tower where he had once obtained the Heavenvoid cauldron. He had been teleported from the northernmost reaches of the Great Jin all the way to the scattered star seas. From these bluestone paths alone, he could not determine which level of the tower he now occupied. So the Heavenvoid Hall and Spirit Void Hall are indeed connected. Han Li murmured softly. Only now did his expression finally relax. With his current level of power being in the scattered star seas, posed no real problem. As long as he could escape this hall and repair the teleportation formation he had previously destroyed after arriving. Here he would be able to return directly to the Heavenly South region. With that thought in mind, Han Li examined the paths before choosing one. His figure instantly shot forward as a streak of azure light. However, after flying for nearly 10 minutes, Han Li realized something strange. Not a single puppet guard had appeared. After a moment of contemplation, he quickly understood the reason. There was still a long time before the next opening of the Heavenvoid Hall. The puppets must have been withdrawn by the hall's restrictions for the time being. Not only that, no traps or other restrictions impeded his path either. It was as though the entire tower had become nothing more than a silent, lifeless structure. However, Han Li had still underestimated the maze-like pathways winding throughout the tower. Although most of the restrictions and puppet guardians had been withdrawn, the suppression on his spiritual sense remained firmly in place. After wandering down countless wrong paths and relying on his bright sight spirit eyes to pierce through layer after layer of illusions, he eventually managed to locate the teleportation formation leading to the next level. Only then did he understand why in the past, Manhua had forcibly sealed everyone's cultivation bases. compelling them to curb their arrogance and obediently follow Zenith Yin and his companion. Along the way, Han Li had already put away the unbroken Chinke devils and the humanoid puppet. He had also broken through several stone gates that led to treasure rooms which had yet to be opened. Yet to his surprise, he discovered no treasures within them, nor did he trigger any restrictions that would eject him from the tower. Perhaps it was because he had not used the Heavenvoid map fragment to open those gates, or perhaps it was simply because the Heavenvoid Hall had not yet officially opened. In any case, the treasures that should have been stored within those chambers had clearly been sealed elsewhere, and even the teleportation restrictions that once guarded them had long since lost their effect. Han Li was unwilling to accept defeat so easily. He searched each treasure chamber, meticulously examining every corner with extreme care. However, he was eventually forced to admit that the formation master who had constructed the Heavenvoid Hall possessed a mastery over formations and restrictions that far surpassed anything he had ever imagined. Han Li could clearly sense that numerous hidden and mysterious restrictions still lingered within those chambers. Yet despite all of his efforts, his search ultimately yielded nothing. Reluctantly, he could only withdraw from the treasure rooms and abandon his ambition of sweeping away all the treasures within the Heavenvoid Hall in one grand stroke. Even though his efforts thus far had been fruitless, Han Li knew that the most important control formation of any structure was often located within its central core. As for the Heavenvoid Hall, its true core was naturally the 5th floor. Back when Han Li had first entered this place, Zenith Yin and the others had been deeply wary of the terrifying restrictions on that level. Besides, their only goal at the time had been to seize the Heavenvoid Cauldron, so none of them had dared to venture further. But things were different now. With his current cultivation base and the aid of his bright sight spirit eyes, perhaps he would be able to uncover something useful there. As for the 10th grade Ice Phoenix, Han Li had no idea where she had teleported herself. Yet he was not the least bit worried that she might have escaped from the tower or even from the Heavenvoid Hall itself. Earlier, he had already discovered one of the tower's outermost walls. There, he detected more than 10 types of powerful restrictions layered upon its surface. Most of them were beyond his understanding, but among the few he could recognize were several restrictions specifically designed to suppress spatial powers. Unless the Ice Phoenix managed to activate a special teleportation formation within the Heavenvoid Hall itself, it would be utterly impossible for her to leave this tower using spatial teleportation. Even with his current cultivation level, Han Li could still sense that the remaining restrictions on the wall were terrifyingly profound and unfathomable. Otherwise, he would have simply blasted his way out of the tower by brute force rather than painstakingly searching for a control formation. After teleporting across 2 more levels, Han Li finally arrived at the 5th floor of the tower. Moments later, he appeared before the Frozen Dragon's Terrace, the very place where he had once obtained the Heavenvoid Cauldron. Thinking back on it, Han Li recalled that the Grand Elders of the North Night Palace had always been referred to as Master Arctic Dragon. That was yet another piece of evidence suggesting a deep connection between the North Night Palace and the Heavenvoid Hall. However, after the Heavenvoid Cauldron had been taken, the staircase here had been completely destroyed. The shattered remains still clearly preserved the traces of the fierce battle that had once taken place between Zenith, Yin Wan Tianming and the others. To Han Li's surprise, the silver-robed woman was already standing upon the terrace. She was gazing thoughtfully at the altar, a contemplative look lingering on her face. Han Li's arrival had clearly drawn her attention. She shot him a cold glance. Then, without uttering a single word, her body swayed and transformed into a streak of light that shot away from the terrace, disappearing down one of the many bluestone paths in the blink of an eye. Han Li silently watched her departure. He had absolutely no intention of stopping her. Only after her figure had vanished completely from sight did he slowly walk toward the altar. He glanced briefly into the cave from which he had once obtained the Heavenvoid Cauldron before expanding the scope of his search. Perhaps the control formation was simply hidden too well, or perhaps he had been searching in the wrong place all along. Regardless of the reason, his efforts once again proved to be in vain. Days passed. Then more days followed. Han Li searched every corner of the entire 5th floor. With each passing day, his expression grew darker. Even after more than half a month had gone by, he still had not discovered the slightest trace of the control formation. On that day, after yet another fruitless search, Han Li emerged from a remote corner of the floor. Leaning lightly against a nearby stone pillar, he allowed his mind to drift. Could it be that the control formation of the Heavenvoid Hall isn't on this level at all? Han Li murmured softly to himself. Perhaps it lies somewhere on one of the other 4 levels. Just as this thought crossed his mind, a flash of white light suddenly erupted nearby. The fabric of space tore open, and the silver-robed woman stepped out from within the rift. Han Li turned his gaze toward her, but remained silent. He knew she would not seek him out without reason, and he was quite curious to hear what she had to say. After all, she had not appeared on the 5th level at all during the past few days. Perhaps she had discovered a way out somewhere else. "Have you found a way out yet, fellow Taoist Han?" the silver-robed woman asked calmly. "If I had, why would I still be here?" Han Li replied in an equally calm tone, as though the conflict between them had never occurred. "From the sound of it, it seems you've discovered something." "I've searched this entire place," the silver-robed woman said slowly. "To break through the restrictions here by brute force would require the combined power of at least 2 or 3 deity transformation cultivators. There are only 2 of us here, so that clearly isn't an option." "I'm already aware of that," Han Li replied indifferently, though his heart stirred slightly. Then I assume you've been searching for the control formation of this place," the silver-robed woman said impatiently, her eyes flashing with frost. Han Li's expression shifted slightly. "I am indeed searching for it," he admitted. "Do you happen to know where it is?" The silver-robed woman took a deep breath. Her expression suddenly darkened. "That's all I needed to hear," she said coldly. "I've already found the control formation, but escaping this place will not be easy. Before that, I need to ask you something." She fixed him with a sharp gaze. "How is this place related to Fairy Ice Soul? And that little cauldron in your hand? Is it the Heavenvoid cauldron? Fairy Ice Soul, who is that?" Han Li asked, momentarily startled. "As for this small cauldron, if you say it's the Heavenvoid cauldron, then I suppose it is." A cold glint flashed through the silver-robed woman's eyes. Only after a long moment did she respond. "Fairy Ice Soul is the ancient cultivator who created the celestial ice flame. She is also the matriarch of the North Night Palace. It seems you truly know nothing about this. As for the Heavenvoid cauldron," she continued slowly, "let me make one thing clear. If you possess it, then you can use it to activate the control formation. If you don't, then you're completely useless to me." Han Li's eyes flickered with surprise. After a brief moment of thought, he finally spoke honestly. "If that's the case, then I'll admit it. This cauldron is indeed the Heavenvoid cauldron. So, where is the control formation?" "Good," the silver-robed woman said calmly. "Since you've admitted it, come with me. If we want to leave this place, we'll have to cooperate this time. Until we escape, I suggest we set aside our differences. Otherwise, neither of us will be able to leave on our own." Without waiting for a reply, her body swayed and transformed into a streak of light that shot toward a certain bluestone path. Han Li frowned slightly. Yet he had no time to ponder the situation too deeply. Moments later, he transformed into a streak of azure light and followed after her. However, after flying for only a short while, a look of surprise appeared on Han Li's face. He suddenly realized that the silver-robed woman was leading him straight toward the frozen dragon's terrace. It was a place he had searched countless times already without finding anything. Yet the silver-robed woman showed no sign of stopping. Han Li could only suppress his curiosity and continue following her. After some time, she finally descended onto the altar at the center of the terrace. Han Li landed beside her and could no longer hold back his question. "Are you certain this is the right place, fellow Taoist Phoenix?" he asked. "Is the control formation really here?" "The wrong place," the silver-robed woman scoffed. "Heh, I could find the control formation here even with my eyes closed." "What do you mean?" Hanli asked, startled. "Have you been here before?" "How could I have ever been here?" she replied coldly. "It's simply that on Icewave Island, where the Ice Phoenix clan resides, there exists a stone terrace that is completely identical to this one. And speaking of which," she glanced briefly at the small cauldron in Hanli's hand. "The cauldron you possess is actually somewhat connected to our Ice Phoenix race." Before Hanli could react to this shocking revelation, the silver-robed woman suddenly rose into the air. Then she pointed rapidly toward several points above the altar. A crisp, cracking sound like porcelain shattering rang out in mid-air. Several blinding balls of white light suddenly appeared. They trembled violently before expanding in an instant to the size of half a wagon wheel. They flickered in the air like blazing white stars before finally merging together into a single massive sphere of light that slowly began to rotate. Hanli pressed his lips together, unable to hide the astonishment on his face. The silver-robed woman glanced sideways at him before continuing her actions. Her fingers danced through the air as she cast one celestial technique after another. Each technique disappeared into the rotating sphere of light. At last, a thunderous boom erupted from the sphere. It shattered apart, transforming into more than a dozen snow-white formation flags. Each flag measured 5 or 6 feet in length, embroidered with ancient runes and mysterious patterns. The formation flags spun through the air before suddenly transforming into dazzling streaks of white light. They shot outward in all directions and sank silently into the ground. A flash of realization appeared in Hanli's eyes. At that very moment, a deep rumbling sound spread throughout the entire Frozen Dragon's terrace. From the center of the altar, a massive formation array slowly emerged. In an instant, it expanded across nearly the entire stone terrace, while lights of countless colors flickered wildly across its surface. The moment the formation spell emerged, the two of them rose into the air and gazed down upon it from above. With only a brief glance, Hanli was able to confirm that the formation before him was indeed the control formation of the Heavenvoid Hall. At the very center of the formation, he saw a diagram that was identical to the Heavenvoid cauldron itself. The sight immediately stirred a memory within him of the moment he had once opened the profound jade cave within the Spirit Void Hall. The formation that had sealed the profound jade cave had also seemed to employ a similar restriction. However, the formation before him now was more than 10 times larger and far more intricate and profound. The silver-robed woman noticed the flicker of recognition that flashed through Hanli's eyes. As she slowly withdrew her celestial techniques, she asked, "You've seen this formation before as well?" "I've seen a similar one somewhere in the North Night Palace," Hanli replied calmly. The silver-robed woman did not probe further. Instead, she immediately said, "I see. That's good news. In that case, you should know how to control this formation as well." "Correct. Try using the Heavenvoid cauldron and see if it can activate it." Hanli hesitated for a brief moment before nodding. He opened his mouth and a ball of azure light emerged before drifting toward the center of the formation. The object within the azure light was none other than the Heavenvoid cauldron, now only several inches in size. Naturally, throughout this entire process, Hanli remained vigilant toward the silver-robed woman. If she showed even the slightest sign of attempting to snatch the cauldron away, he would withdraw it immediately. The Heavenvoid cauldron flew toward the center of the massive formation before stopping at Hanli's command, hovering directly above the cauldron diagram engraved on the ground. At that very moment, the entire diagram of the cauldron lit up. A pillar of azure light erupted skyward, enveloping the Heavenvoid cauldron within it. Hanli suddenly felt a disturbance ripple through his spiritual sense, and his connection with the cauldron was severed once again. His expression changed abruptly as he instinctively glanced at the silver-robed woman beside him. Seeing that she had made no unusual movements, he relaxed slightly and turned his attention back toward the Heavenvoid cauldron. Within the azure pillar of light, the Heavenvoid cauldron began to emit a clear ringing sound as its size rapidly expanded. Moments later, the cauldron had grown to match the size of the diagram beneath it. At the same time, the images of countless plants and beasts carved upon its surface began to shimmer into existence. Hanli felt his spiritual sense stir again as his connection with the cauldron was restored. However, before he could feel relieved, his magic power began to surge uncontrollably toward the cauldron like a raging flood. Hanli's expression immediately darkened. At that exact moment, the silver-robed woman suddenly formed a hand seal and pointed toward the center of the formation. A pillar of white light shot forth, disappearing into the giant cauldron diagram in an instant. Hanli immediately felt the rate at which his magic power was draining slow to a manageable degree. His expression relaxed slightly. Had the silver-robed woman not intervened, he would have immediately severed the flow of magic power and recalled the Heavenvoid cauldron. Even so, the cauldron now resembled a bottomless abyss, relentlessly devouring both his magic power and that of the silver-robed woman. A short while later, nearly half of Hanli's magic power had already been drained away, and his expression grew grim once again. At that moment, a deep rumbling sound emerged from the formation below. Some of the runes slowly began to glow. However, the light they emitted was faint and weak, as if the formation had only just begun to awaken. This won't work. Our magic power isn't sufficient to activate this formation, the silver-robed woman exclaimed. Her expression changed as she withdrew her hand seal. The pillar of azure light immediately shattered and dissipated. Hanli's brows furrowed. He quickly cut off the flow of magic power and waved a hand toward the Heavenvoid cauldron in the distance. The cauldron trembled slightly as a pillar of light shot outward. In the blink of an eye, it shrank back to its original size before disappearing into Hanli's sleeve. This isn't merely a matter of insufficient magic power, Hanli said as he looked down at the formation below with tightly knitted brows. This control formation can only be activated by a deity transformation cultivator. I'm only at the mid-nascent soul stage, while you're at the late-nascent soul stage. There's no way we can succeed. As the Heavenvoid cauldron vanished, the pillar of azure light erupting from the giant cauldron diagram also faded away. The rumbling and flashing lights from the formation gradually died down until the entire terrace fell silent once again. After a brief pause, the silver-robed woman spoke. That may not necessarily be true. A deity transformation cultivator isn't the only one capable of activating this formation. If several late-nascent soul cultivators joined forces, that would also suffice. Hanli faltered slightly before turning to her with disbelief in his eyes. You must be joking, fellow Taoist Phoenix, he said. Even 4 late-nascent soul cultivators are no match for a single deity transformation cultivator. You should know better than anyone the gulf between those two realms. In terms of combat power, that's true, the silver-robed woman replied calmly. A deity transformation cultivator can draw upon the world's origin chi, so naturally a late-nascent soul cultivator cannot compete. However, I possess a secret technique that can temporarily combine the magic power of several cultivators into one unified source. If we use that technique to power the Heavenvoid cauldron, we should be able to activate this formation. Is that so? Hanli asked thoughtfully. Could it be that you're planning to use my unbroken cinque devils and my puppet for this technique? The silver-robed woman chuckled softly. You truly are clever, fellow Taoist Han. That was exactly my intention. With the combined power of the unbroken cinque devils in their fused form, your puppet, and myself, our chances of success would be quite high. As she spoke, the icy indifference on her face melted away, replaced by a gentle and alluring smile, as though she had suddenly become an entirely different person. Hanli, however, paid no attention to her breathtaking beauty. Instead, he was deep in thought. You didn't mention my name just now, he said slowly. Does that mean I cannot participate in this technique? That won't work, the silver-robed woman replied with a faint smile. This secret technique can only be performed by cultivators of the same cultivation level. Furthermore, the one controlling the combined magic power must be the participant with the highest cultivation base. You may be stronger than any mid-nascent soul cultivator I've ever seen. but there is still a considerable gap between you and a late nascent soul cultivator. Han Li's expression suddenly darkened. Ha! In order to control the Heavenvoid cauldron, one must first master the artifact imprint technique. Are you asking me to hand over my Heavenvoid cauldron to you? A spirit treasure is certainly valuable, the Ice Phoenix replied calmly. But unless you want to remain trapped here forever, this is the only way out. Don't even think about it, Han Li replied without hesitation. I will never agree to that. The silver-robed woman was clearly surprised by his firm refusal. She raised an eyebrow about to respond, but Han Li cut her off coldly. Let me tell you something. This place opens once every 300 years. Even if we do nothing, we'll still be able to leave eventually. We'll simply have to wait. I've changed my mind. I'm not in a hurry to leave anymore. Instead, I'll remain here and cultivate. Heh. If I manage to advance to the late nascent soul stage, I'll come find you again. Farewell for now, fellow Taoist Phoenix. With that, Han Li transformed into a streak of azure light and shot away from the stone terrace, disappearing down a blue stone corridor in the blink of an eye. This place opens once every 300 years, the silver-robed woman murmured. A trace of joy appeared in her eyes as she swallowed the words she had intended to say. Although she had missed her chance to seize Han Li's spirit treasure, it was still excellent news that she would not be trapped here forever. 300 years meant almost nothing to a heavenly spirit beast like her, whose lifespan stretched for tens of thousands of years. In truth, she had originally planned to employ a secret technique that inflicted severe self-harm, but could temporarily grant her the power of a deity transformation cultivator. With that power, she would easily be able to kill Han Li and seize the Heavenvoid cauldron. However, the cost of such a technique was devastating. Not only could it only be used by a 10th grade Ice Phoenix, it would also severely damage the user's Tao foundation, making it nearly impossible to ever advance to the deity transformation stage in the future. Even for someone like her who had long since satisfied the requirements for such a breakthrough, the consequences would be catastrophic. Thus, she had been extremely reluctant to resort to such a method. Originally, she had planned to attempt her breakthrough soon as she was nearing the end of her lifespan. However, Old Devil Che's avatar had informed her of the spatial node, recruiting her to attack the North Night Palace instead. Because of that, her breakthrough had been postponed, leaving her still at the late nascent soul stage. Of course, advancing to the deity transformation stage here would not have been a bad option either. If she succeeded, she could easily kill Han Li, take the Heavenvoid cauldron, and escape. Unfortunately, Ice Phoenixes were special beings. They could only undergo their breakthrough during a sacred ceremony held within the holy land of their race, Ice Abyss Island. Otherwise, even if they managed to advance, they would never be able to progress any further. The silver-robed woman naturally did not dare take such a risk before escaping this place. Of course, Han Li knew none of this. He had revealed the truth about the Heavenvoid Hall opening every 300 years, only because he feared she might grow desperate and attack him. As long as she saw a sliver of hope, she would not be inclined to fight him to the death. As for his comment about advancing to the late nascent soul stage, it had merely been spoken casually. The silver-robed woman did not take it seriously either. Breaking through to the late nascent soul stage was no simple matter. Countless mid-nascent soul cultivators spent their entire lives stuck at that level, unable to advance even until the day they died. The silver-robed woman remained standing on the terrace for a long time, lost in thought. Eventually she murmured softly, "Albeit, I still have several secret techniques that I haven't fully mastered. This is a good opportunity to refine them. If I succeed, my chances of defeating that man will greatly improve." With that thought, she stomped lightly on the ground. Her body instantly transformed into a streak of light that flew off in the opposite direction from Han Li. She intended to find a suitable stone chamber where she could enter seclusion and cultivate. Half a day later, Han Li arrived within a hidden chamber measuring roughly 400 feet in both length and width. He sat cross-legged on the ground. Before him lay a pale white pond, more than 100 feet across. Spiritual qi mixed with a faint, fragrant aroma drifted from its waters. This was the mysterious secret chamber on the second floor, the very place where Han Li had once encountered Yuan Yao. Not only was it extremely well concealed, it also contained a powerful spirit, making it an ideal location for cultivation. Nevertheless, to guard against any unforeseen events, Han Li sealed the teleportation formation on this level, rendering it temporarily unusable. He then set up several formation flags to conceal the entire chamber. With these precautions in place, even a 10th grade ice phoenix would find it extremely difficult to locate him.